Hello and welcome to the flip side of adversity. I am Dr. Veirdre Jackson, the CEO and creative behind Living Strong Consulting. So I want to ask you something. What if the very pain that tried to break you was actually the foundation for your success? What if the experiences you thought would destroy you actually created open doors? Life can throw us, can anyone agree? Obstacles. They can come at us, whether it's hardship or it's a setback. But what if those moments aren't meant to define who you are, but actually refine you? How do you turn pain into power? How do you transform the lessons into your legacy? If you've ever felt your struggles were actually holding you back, this is the episode for you. We are going to challenge how you are actually looking at adversity. We're going to have you shift your perspective and see it differently, not as something that stops you, but as something that strengthens you. Are you ready to rise, rebuild, and redefine your future? Well, let's dive into Unbroken and creating a flip side to your adversity. We'll be right back. Trauma, toxic stress, broken habit, and hurting heart don't define destiny, but peace isn't passive. It requires an exchange. To create a flip and access peace in the middle of the pieces, you are challenged to make an exchange of the lies that have kept you mentally hostage in basement moments. Resilience isn't about bouncing back, but bouncing forward. Living Strong, the flip side of adversity, brings powerful stories and fearless conversations from experts in the field of business, relationships, emotional, physical, and mental health, and faith-based communities. Each episode creates a brave space with powerful tools from authentic connections. Tune in as we dig in with Dr. Jackson on the flip side of adversity. Well, if you have been following me at all during this week, then you know this conversation is a special one. I had the privilege of starting the new year off in Accra, Ghana, and I met several amazing human beings, and I have the pleasure of having a flip side conversation with one of them. Now, I need to give you, I can't read his entire bio. It is extensive. So I grabbed a couple of nuggets just to get you cued into the power of this conversation. So let's welcome Nanye Kofi Osae-Asare. He is a dynamic entrepreneur with a passion for finance, fragrances, and fashion, building a career that unlocks the value for investors through mood seasons alchemistry. He channels his creativity into crafting luxurious fragrances under mood seasons, perfumes, while providing that success and style go hand in hand. His journey is a testament to turning passion into purpose, inspiring others to embrace their potential and elevate the art of living well. Welcome to the flip side of adversity, Nanye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Jackson.
I am so excited about this conversation. You we were both on a platform at the Voices of Change Leadership Conference, and your entire uh, talk, power talk, really pulled me in as you spoke from your own place of adversity, but really challenging us all to think about how our literal lives are our business. And so I was hooked in, especially once you started talking about how as parents, my followers know you hit all of the buttons. You hit all of the buttons. So I want to actually jump in first, starting with the word that you decided to encapsulate our conversation, because I believe that words are significant. They hold power. So can you start us off by just explaining, what does the word unbroken mean for you?
Um, the word unbroken sort of encapsulates how I would describe what my resilience in my experiences of my life have been in hindsight.
Yeah.
And I say hindsight because these are not things that you realize you are experiencing in the moment until someone or something highlights that direction to you or describes that what you're going through is a particular thing. And then it's up to you to decide what context to associate this thing to when it comes to you. And I think however you decide to approach it is how your life is pretty much going to be going through until
Yeah.
you decide to change it.
Yeah.
And I think when I was reading through these words were sort of the words that came up to me because now I look back and I think, okay, this is what it was.
Mm.
And I have, I've come to a very privileged position in my life in this point in time where I can now describe it in the exact way it's supposed to be, give context to the experiences that I had, and hopefully bear fruit to be able to help other people who maybe go through these things without being able to describe them themselves using my descriptions. They might find some similarities and synergies, and so that's pretty much what I've found
Yeah.
in most cases when I discuss these things with most people.
Yes. The fact that we all have some type of story, something that could have broken us, but it's how you are now looking at what you went through. And so you have had a pretty significant and extraordinary story that has you have some stories of challenges that you've actually been able to move through. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and some of these defining moments that have shaped who you are and how you're saying, I am still and yet unbroken?
I consider myself fortunate to have experienced certain things earlier on in my life. Again, all of this is in hindsight. Um, to give a breakdown, I was born into, a middle class, borderline upper class family. Both parents were, well educated, well experienced. Both owned a home, car, the usual stuff. And I was born into, my father was a very strong Pan-African, very into technological advancements. And my mother was everything music. She could play every musical instrument under the sun. And I was born into a house with a lot of creativity, and love to a major extent. So I was born into having a glimpse of what completeness looked like.
Mm. Wow.
Then I'm yeah. So so unfortunately, my mother passed when I was 5, and I carried on, with a very very active father, um, who gave me the benefit of speaking to me a lot. So it was there was a lot of guidance to what I was experiencing, and it was not babied because my father didn't know how to baby. So it was and I mean, to give you some context, I was sort of a bit of a miracle child. My mother actually had been divorced because she couldn't have kids, and my father had now married her as a second relationship after the first one. You know, he had four kids elsewhere, and so I'm going to assume that the arrangement and understanding was, you know what, okay, we can live our lives with just us, and then I come into the picture. So you know, so yeah, so I think my dad's future plans went on its head. You know, I'm sure, you know, not only with me being born, but with him now being solely responsible for me.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it was a case where, you know, we're both in the house now, twiddling our thumbs, and he's looking at me like, you know, what do I do with you? Right. So so that gives a bit of background as to the kind of upbringing I would have had. So I was very aware of my environment. I was aware of the differences between um, my home upbringing and the classmates I was with. Um, you know, my dad was very intentional about my education, um, particularly in areas of mathematics and science, which is what he was a teacher in. And of course, did I mention he was a Pan-African? So of course, year of return was happening every day
Yes.
in our house, you
Yes.
know, so to speak. So I think what it did was it gave me a first glimpse into every question I had, he answered.
Wow.
And that was very important for me because I didn't know where my future was going to go. And neither did he, but subconsciously, he was proactively preparing me for what was to come.
Mhm.
Because alas, when I was 12, he would then pass away himself.
Mm.
And so that's when life really began for me. And I remember, I'll never forget the day. It was the 12th of May, 2003. And that was the day he died.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, it wasn't it wasn't a moment of sadness. It wasn't a moment of, you know, there were those that came in cycles, but it was an anticipation of, okay, so all the things I now went back into my brain and think, okay, what were all the things my dad was telling me?
Wow.
And yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And my first inclination was, I guess I need to get a job now.
Yeah. At 12?
That was the sort of,
Wow.
yeah, 13. At
Wow.
13, at 13, I got a job in a pharmaceutical lab. It was a night shift, and in that lab, in the area it was in, it was full of people who didn't know how to read or write. So when I came in, it was an opportunity for me to sort of sneak in. You know, everybody knew I was below the age, but they were like, well, he knows how to do it, so we can just sort of pay him by cash. And that's how I paid for my provisions and the things I needed for school. I would spend the rest of school um, working this shift for from the age of 13 to 19
Mm-hmm.
without a single student knowing that that's what I was doing. So I would sneak out of boarding school, go and do a night shift, sneak back in, sleep a couple hours. If I managed to stay up in class, then you know, so be it.
Wow.
That's pretty much was my normality.
Wow.
And all through it, there were moments where at this point I wasn't mature enough to say, you know, this is my mindset and things like that. These weren't conscious decisions I was making. I think they were reactionary defenses that had been programmed into me subconsciously because of my exposure to the kind of conversation I was
Yeah.
having with my father.
Yep.
I think that's
Yeah.
what it was. So there is a certain, I discovered that there was a certain grace that you are given, that you inherited from your parents.
Yeah. I literally
There's a
was
certain
thinking
grace.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That there was a
yeah,
blueprint that those conversations created that then allowed you to be literally strategic, a thinker, a problem solver, creating your next step. Like he created a blueprint for you to create the map to be a man even when you were still a boy.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
very much so. Yeah, very much so. So I think I don't know how much impact he would have thought it was putting onto me at the time.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean, you can imagine being a boy from the age of 5 to 12. I wasn't particularly excited to have conversations about Marcus Garvey. I wasn't particularly excited to be told to read a book, Quaker and Nancy the Spider or Chinua Achebe, all of these things. They weren't things that I was, you know, trying to do,
Right.
intentionally. It was more of a punishment. It was more of a go and do this. It was more like, go and do it because I told you to do so. But I would say at every single point of my life growing up, there were certain facets of the pieces of experiences that I had with my father, and don't get me, and with experiences that came off the back of that, that prepared me to be able to handle, at least for that moment, to not have to struggle in the
Mhm.
way in which I would have if those lessons were missing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I make that a key point because again, you are not intentionally doing the things you're supposed to be doing. We'll come back to that point because there is a point where your grace runs out. So
Uh-oh.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if you think about there's a very I'm wondering if you can explain a quote that I read an article that was written about you. And in the article, it quotes you as saying, "We are products of our decisions, not our circumstances." And
Yeah.
that quote jumped off of the page of the article for me because it really aligns with as I've tried to build this story around creating the flip side of adversity, one decision, one action at a time. But I love to hear from you. When you say that quote, how does that connect with your own life story?
Um, I would say that our circumstances are like the factory. It's like setting up a company. Your circumstances are what your plans were,
Mm-hmm.
or what your anticipations were. It's what you had, the assets you had at the beginning. You don't know whether the company is going to become a multi-billion dollar company, right?
Right.
The multi-million dollar stage status comes from the decisions you make and not from how you started.
Yes.
Because you can start with all the assets and all the intellectual property and everything and still turn a profit of zero and go bankrupt.
Yeah.
But the decisions you do within knowing what you have, I think where you start and what you have is very important
Mm-hmm.
because it allows you to make your decisions within the right context. So it's not okay to ignore your circumstances. You're better off carrying your circumstances and making your decisions based off of what you're holding. And if
Mm-hmm.
you need to find something else, figure out how you're going to barter trade the
Yes.
things you don't need for
Yes.
the things you do in order to achieve that. And that decision making in that barter trades operation is what makes that difference. It's what removes the problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people try to erase problems,
Yes.
but actually, you're better off replacing them. I mean,
Mm.
erasing would imply that what you had no relevance to you whatsoever.
Wow.
But yeah, but swapping implies that you value what you have. So when you're swapping, you're looking for an alternative, but you see some value in what you have that might be useful for whoever you're swapping with or whatever you're
Yeah.
swapping with. So, for example, my adversity could be the beginning of someone else's progress, but they needed to experience what I experienced in order to get there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times when we're looking for advice, really we resonate with people that have struggled in the same way. And that even having conversations with other people is the barter trade
Right.
if you're prepared to learn from it.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and I think again, I'm saying all these things with hindsight, but now I'm putting to words what I was discovering over time. And I think in all honesty, if I was to, if I understood this from the very beginning, I think I would have gotten to where I got to a lot quicker, right? And that's why we have these conversations so other people can hear this and
Yes.
not have to spend so much time approaching things in the wrong way.
Right. But just how you explained that moment is the same way you explained it when I was in Accra. And there's such a powerful um, the decision making, instead of coming from a victim place and trying to ignore or erase or deny the circumstances, your experiences, you actually can say, this is what I have. And there's a powerful moment when you then decide, I'm going to exchange this because either it's no longer serving me, it did what it was supposed to do in the moment, and now I'm exchanging it for my next step. There's so much power in that, which literally aligns with this concept that I've been trying to communicate, is that you can create a flip. Just because what has happened does not mean that that's going to define everything that's possible for you. When you think about pivotal moments, like pivotal moments where you felt like you shifted from the survival place to actually growing and thriving. Can you give us a snapshot of one of those moments?
The day my son was born, that was, I
Don't
think,
get me all warm. Yes.
yeah, yeah. When the day I held my son was the day I was prepared to make decisions. I think I think they got to a point where I was aware of decisions I was meant to make. I think a lot of the times we find ways and reasons to justify not making a decision or taking long to make a decision or choosing the wrong path
Mm-hmm.
altogether. And when I held him in my arms, it was no longer, the repercussions were no longer solely,
Yes.
were no longer only mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I needed that wake up call because I think when you feel like the repercussions only rely on you, you tend to be very nonchalant about your decision making, especially when you have enough distractions in your life going on. So,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we call distractions busy, but they're distractions.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And I think for me, I was in survival mode, like you said, for a long time. And so when you're in survival mode, you become very selfish in your decision making. You
Mm-hmm.
don't really tend to think about anyone else because you are able to justify the fact that no one was there for you in
Yeah.
this whole duration anyway.
Yeah.
So why should I? And I think you will find it very difficult to get anywhere alone. And I think that that's something that people really need to understand that, you can't get and you can only go so far on your own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that wake up call for me was seeing him. Mind you, prior to that, I have dropped out of university, med school, and then another course before that. I am going from job to job, room to room, house to house, just getting by. I'll be fine. And now this boy who's helpless has no will rely on me completely. I'm holding this newborn baby, and I'm thinking to myself, no, what is immediately you start thinking legacy.
That's the
And I
word
think
I
and
was
I
waiting
think
for.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you start thinking legacy. And I think for me, it's hard to you can either choose to ignore that thought of legacy in your head,
Mm-hmm.
which is easy to do so if you've not had much of an experience
Mm.
in a father figure thinking that way. As a man, I'm going to speak
Yeah.
from a man's perspective because that's what I am, right? And I think you don't prioritize the things you've never experienced, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I was very fortunate enough, and I always tell friends that actually I'm in a very small percentile of people that has had that
Mm-hmm.
as a man.
Yeah.
So, and not only as a father who's there, but a father who's actively present and trying to focus on legacy. It was very clear my dad was very legacy focused. you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was impossible to ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because of that, I made decisions immediately. I enrolled in university. All of a sudden when I'm dilly-dallying between the courses I want to do, I immediately knew exactly what I wanted to do. My why had been answered. And, I think when your why is answered, you start to make decisions that gear towards that angle. And a big decision that comes with the why is when you are prepared to learn about yourself.
You know what?
You
You
know, we
just
we
echoed. Yep.
spend, yeah,
Yep. Yeah. You just echoed the concept when I work with parents here in the US. Um, there's this concept that good parenting or healthy parenting is not just about the amount of love, but it's whether or not a parent has reconciled their own story. That becomes the avenue for healthy parenting. Love will come, but when a parent has reconciled their own story, it literally breaks chains, breaks breaks dysfunction, all of that. So that so resonates with me. When you think
yeah.
about the fact that you've created a legacy with finance, fragrance, and fashion. Now, how did we get the, to these three?
Simple answer, I figured out who I was.
Oh,
So I understood, I was prepared to study myself.
okay.
I studied myself like how I studied masters.
Mm,
I used to document and make note of how a particular feeling, how a particular event made me feel. So I remember at the time when I was younger, people used to ask me, "Oh, how do you deal with your parents' loss and things like that?" And I always said that I equate it to a feeling. So the worst feeling I ever felt in my entire life has been when my father died. So the way I saw it was that's the worst I could feel. So if something I'm going through doesn't match that intensity of negative feeling,
mhm,
then I'll be fine.
mhm.
And that's
Wow.
what carried me through. But that carried me as long as I had the grace that accompanied me for that period. You remember when I said there's a certain grace? Everybody gets a certain grace at different stages where it's like, it's there's a verse in the Bible that says God would never give you something you cannot handle. I'm paraphrasing
Mm,
here.
mm,
But if you think about it, there are certain things that we have all been able to get away with,
mm,
where at the time, not getting away with it would not have helped us in any way. There would have been
okay.
no way of coming out from that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are younger and we're growing up, we have that grace. What happens is when we grow up and we start to be in these positions, we start to lose that grace, and it now feels like we're having to do so much more to achieve results we've had in the past,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, you had a period where you have this great career period, usually in your mid 20s to 30s, something just clicks. It's working. And then a few years later, you're like, okay, let me do more of it. And then it just doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
anymore,
Mm-mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that grace period has ended. And now it's like, okay, great. Now what have you learned?
Right. Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So when I understood that, it became a lot easier. And I only understood that when I started learning about myself.
Wow.
So finance, fashion, and fragrances essentially are the three ways in which I express myself.
Okay.
That was it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when I understood that, I understood that the scientific way of thinking that I loved and enjoyed so much, I didn't enjoy it because of the scientific content. I enjoyed it because of the way scientists think. So in finance, when I went into finance, I'm with people that have lived on making assumptions. Coming from science, it's either theory or law. right? So
Mm-hmm.
we don't use as many assumptions. So when you come into the financial discipline with a science background, it's actually a lot easier because you ignore the over assumptions. So you'll find that engineers work very well in finance because they have a scientific way of thinking. So when the market is thinking in a particular way, or we think this is going to happen based on assumption, the scientist is thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. We'll just do this.
That
Right?
doesn't that's not logical.
Yeah, right. And I think that really helped. One I was very good at science when I was a kid. I used to memorize the periodic table, um, and through music. Songs was music was a thing for me. I don't know what it was and whether it was inherited, probably was. And I was that kid that used to record music from radio onto cassette tapes. And my dad would come home and try and listen to a song, and it's a new piece of music, right? And and I used to assign my memory with the music that was playing at the time.
Mm.
It was very easy to remember things. So even when I was in school, when I went to boarding school, a very big transition from the UK curriculum to Ghana curriculum. I just remembered what I was listening to at the time in which I was studying, and it just stuck. That's just what it
Mm.
was. That was my grace at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That clearly doesn't work for me now.
Right.
But at the time, that was what my grace was. You know that saying, saving grace. That's where it comes from. So I think the more and more I learned about myself, the things I don't like, the things that I might need to improve upon, the gifts that I really have.
Mm.
You're growing up in a time where everybody wants to do things based on the circumstances in which they might find themselves if they get there.
Wow.
So a lot of the times you find yourself trying to avoiding who you are, essentially. Think of it this way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the one of the things I get commended for is my teaching ability, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've spent my entire life avoiding teaching because both my parents were
We're
teachers,
teachers.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But of course I'm going to be good at teaching, right? But we spend so much time trying to readjust ourselves into what others think,
Right.
because when we're growing up, some people are more confident in what they want to do than others. When we grow up, we start to realize that there are certain costs that we never knew existed. Then we start to reprice our thoughts as to what we think might be able to suit the lifestyle that
Mm-hmm.
we will live. So
Mm-hmm.
we've gone away from the passion, what we love, to what would work, to all other things that are so far that start to distance themselves away from who you are,
Yeah.
to a point where you find yourself trying to be something else and it doesn't click because that's not who you are, and you've not spent any time trying to identify who you are, what you like, and you're not prepared to take a chance
Mm-hmm.
on it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And if you think about betting, imagine betting for a soccer team where there's 22 players. You're betting that all 22 players are going to do exactly what they need to do individually, collectively, as a team. They need to have the right thought, the right decision making to do the exact thing that you've put money on to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you're not prepared to bet on yourself.
On yourself.
You can actually
Yeah.
control your actions,
Yeah.
right? So I think when I realized that, I became more confident in betting on myself when I understood who I was. So I knew I could answer, I can do it, and this is why. It's no longer a hope thing. It's no longer oh, if subject to. It's a well, I cannot, right? Why can't I? Because I can't do this particular thing. Can I learn this thing? Probably. Maybe I should, right? Yeah. So it was simple things like this. When I started, I said I was very fortunate to have experienced losses earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
When you experience losses earlier on, you don't have enough excuses to make,
Yeah. Yeah.
because when you've experienced loss earlier on, you've learned how to take an L.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some losses are, losses that you can't control are some of the biggest L's you can ever take. And if you can overcome those losses, every other thing is like a, yeah. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Once you
It
recognize
doesn't
that you're
match.
still
It
here.
doesn't
Yeah.
match my father dying.
Right, right.
Yeah,
I'm still here. After that, I'm still here. So I survived that. I can survive this. We had a guest on.
exactly.
She was a psychiatrist, and she shared that oftentimes she tries to help her clients understand that you already know how to do hard things. Think of all the hard things you've done to get to this moment. It's just that you now have to learn how to do this hard thing. And I think about your barter, your shift, your exchange, that now that I'm in this situation, I now need to figure out, what am I keeping? What do I need to trade so that I can do this hard thing? Because I already have a track record of doing things that are hard. Yeah. Uh,
You know, actually, as well, I think when I started reading, that was also something that changed.
mhm.
I think you're talking about a time where it wasn't cool to read, right? Our generation was the MySpace, the YouTube, like where things started, where distractions started.
You're exposing
So
your age. I'm just letting you know. I'm
yeah,
just
that's
saying, I'm just letting you
yeah,
know, because you mentioned
yeah,
you mentioned tapes. Now you mentioned MySpace.
yeah,
you're
yeah.
letting it
I
you're letting it
definitely
all
had a
out.
Walkman to it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you see the thing is, the crazy thing, you don't actually have to remember the name of the book you read
Mm,
or the details about it. You just need to be exposed to something. You just need to read it once. And I think sometimes there's a subconscious learning that you develop just by seeing something.
mm,
Imagine the difference between someone who has not read it at all
mhm,
and someone who heard it in passing.
mhm.
There is a
Very
knowledge in one
true.
person
Yeah.
and there is an absence of it in the other,
Right.
right? And I started to realize that actually the easiest way to sort of understand how things are, well, how do other people do it? So I went through a phase where I was reading a lot of biographies, like a lot of
Yes.
biographies. In
Yes.
fact, the closer the person was to who I wanted to be, I'd read it straight. When they turned everything to audiobooks, it was over for me. I was just like, audiobooks, perfect. Like, and
Everything.
so things like that.
Yeah.
And one book taught me something. It taught me to quantify your problems. So
Mm,
basically, if you were to write every single habit, negative habit that you have, right?
right.
And you were to assign each negative habit a cost.
Wow.
The book's logic says that if you fix the habit, you will save that amount of money,
And people are
right?
motivated by dollars.
So if nothing motivates you at all,
Yeah.
consider fixing your problems as a moneymaker
Yeah.
by literally reducing your costs. When you're coming into a company and you're taking over, the first thing you look for is what is expensive,
Yeah.
right? And our negative habits, our indecisions all have a cost.
Mm.
Some are more expensive than others, right? So if you can listen, and that's what I'm saying, if you're not prepared to study yourself,
Study yourself.
you won't
Yes.
be prepared to write down honestly what
Mm-hmm.
your problems are,
Mm-hmm. But also,
right?
if you aren't connected to your why or your legacy, you won't make the investment of actually doing the checks and balances, because you're not truly understanding that your life is not just your own. Not even just, I know you and I are both parents, but even if you're not a parent, you're tied to your life, your existence is tied to something bigger than you. And so being able to find your why also can push you to assess the cost of staying the same.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you don't you struggled with being identified as a teacher, but I know that you invest in young people, that you really are committed to helping others really understand how to maximize their life, to live from a full place. Even if we just look at your finance business and how you help clients uncover value in the global market. So, when you think about how you're trying to create an impact outside of your son, but just creating an impact, how do you create a parallel between uncovering value in business and how we can, as you're impacting others who are still in a place of adversity or they're still in a place of feeling stuck?
It's a tough one because I think depending on who you're speaking to, there's a different point at which you start your conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but I've learned to be, we've all been on the other side before where someone is telling you that, hey, you just have to persevere and think, and when they're saying it, it's very annoying, So I'm very conscious of that as well. My students, so to speak, I approach them in a more practical way.
Okay.
So, um, you know, I'll give you an example. I remember there was I'll call him an entrepreneur, and he was very passionate about money here and there, and his focus was money. And my I always teach the focus to be value,
Yeah.
adding value, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you add value, money is just a current, it's just it's a currency of value. It's a confirmation that you are adding value.
Yeah.
If you're adding value to someone, Apple are adding value in giving an iPhone. That's why someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to look at
Mm-hmm.
it from a crude sense of view. But if the more people you impact, the more you will start to get back,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's directly or indirectly. In fact, even when you teach and impact other people, you learn more.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned even way more about myself and things I'm talking about, the more I discuss it with people, because you're adding more of a context to a thought process you have. And mind you, my thought processes have changed. They change all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Mm-hmm.
certain DNA that sticks as I start to learn and progress, but you're always trying to understand yourself even more. There are circumstances that could change your entire context at that
Mm-hmm.
moment in time, and you have to be prepared to be flexible based on the understanding of yourself and what you have in order to make the change necessary.
Mm-hmm.
The same way you would do that for a business is the same way you do that for the first business you've ever experienced, which is yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, when I was speaking in Cape Coast, I spoke of the fact that we see ourselves as businesses. And so my message to a lot of the people that I speak to when they say, I say, okay, let's scratch that. What if this was a business? What would your decision be then?
Right.
What choice would you make if you were a company? What if it wasn't David that was going through that had just been scammed? What if it was David Limited that has
Mm-hmm.
been scammed? Would you still go look for this person's house and go punch him up?
Mm.
If
Mm-hmm.
if it was if it was David Limited, would you still go and spend money you don't have on that table in that club?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That they understand that.
Yes.
So I approach it from that perspective because honestly speaking, there's going to be enough mindset podcasts and mindset videos and things like that. I think we people have seen those, but the ignition to actually act based on on a new form of an accountability that you've created for yourself, only you can do that. And it's one of those things where you're either going to decide to do it or not. The motivation doesn't have to be what other people's motivations are. In fact, if your motivation is just to drive a Mercedes car and that's what
Mm-hmm.
makes you make decisions that's best for yourself, run with it. I guarantee you, after 6 months, the motivation will change automatically anyway,
Yes.
especially if it's going well,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I've approached it from you know what, okay, cool, what drives you? I always ask
Mm-hmm.
them, what drives you? And the answers are sometimes they don't even have an answer. right?
So
And
true.
sometimes that is the problem. Sometimes that is the problem that they don't have a driver. They have an existence clause. They have a desire. They have a hope. They have a wish,
Hmm.
but they don't have an actual. They don't have a target.
Hmm.
So when someone says, "Hey, I want to be a millionaire," and I say, "Okay, well, how much do you want to have?" They say, "I want to have 50 million, 100 million." Okay, great. How are you getting it? What exactly are you going to do that's
Yeah.
going to allow you to have that 100 million, right? And then they haven't really thought about it. And then the second question I ask them, which always catches them off guard, is in your progress to getting 10 million, what are some of the signs you expect to see that you're heading in the right direction?
Yeah.
So, because they don't know what they're expecting to see, they don't know if they're doing something right.
Hmm.
So they may go through, they may make a decision based on that driver. They'll get to a point that they're supposed to get to. Now, mind you, they've never been a millionaire before, so they don't know what the process looks like, and they've not looked into what it might entail. So they may have gotten to a bottleneck that every person who is about to make 150,000 must go through, right? Because they don't have an idea of what the checkpoint looks like.
Yes.
That is a problem for them, and they stop there,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They stop there because they don't know that that actually is the direction and that was supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think until until you are able to do that, and that's what I'm saying, if you don't understand who you are, it's very difficult to identify a checkpoint.
Yeah. But
In fact, if you
also,
don't know who you are, you can see a checkpoint separately. Yeah.
I agree in who you are, but you brought us full circle back to a skill or strategy you suggested for all of us is to read, right? So once I know
Yeah.
who I am, what I am passionate about, and what I'm even like naturally gifted for, if I had read 3 or 4 books of other people who made 10 million, $50 million, I would then begin to have a blueprint. So it's not just wanting it, but how are you going to study? Study yourself and study the track record of those who have already done what you want to get to. You gave us both. You gave us both. Me and actually read. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. When you think about,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say another thing as well that I managed to figure out was once I figured out who I was, I started looking for people who are like me.
I love
So
that.
I wasn't looking for people who act like me. I was looking for people who were like me. There's a difference. Let's say you've watched a movie. How do you know if someone's like you? How do you know someone's watched the same movie as you? They'll be talking and referencing the same parts of the movie.
Context. Mm-hmm.
They'll be
Mm-hmm.
right. They'll be
Mm-hmm.
understanding. You would know. So and funny enough, I remember at the time, this was in 2008. I narrowed it down to three people. And the thing is, if you're not confident in yourself, you will not be able to accept that those people are the people that are like you. The first one was Kanye West. Now, the reason why was see Kanye West. I think there was a certain amount of audacity that Kanye West had that made me because I was coming from a boarding school environment where you were taught to be you weren't taught to be confident.
Okay.
Confidence wasn't really a thing.
Mm.
So I went from Ghana to the UK, and I remember my first ever interview was a university interview. And I remember feeling so timid and not being able to really sell myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I watched this guy who is a guy who's passionate about music,
Mm.
about his art, had experienced intentional traineeship under his mother,
Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm.
was confident enough to pursue his dreams irrespectively, and had just lost his mother
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at the time. The decisions he made were made based on the fact that he knew who he was. And so he was prepared to make decisions on his own context, even if the whole world was not following the same context.
Mm.
You
Mm-hmm.
will find that a lot of people that are successful in any sphere of life
Yeah.
have done something of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
right? They
Yeah.
have been prepared to follow their business philosophy.
Yeah.
They may not even know it's a business philosophy. They believe in who they are so much so that they are prepared to act in every way within the context of who they are,
Mm-hmm.
to a point where everybody else conforms to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they attract value. So when you're able to do that, you attract value, right?
Yeah.
So that there were and you start to find that when you attract value, things like I don't think you can essentially make the when you're trying to target, let's say, millionaire status, you'll find that a lot of people that did become millionaires didn't actually target trying to become a millionaire. They targeted trying to increase how often they could show how valuable they were or
Yeah.
what their service was.
Mm-hmm.
They were so passionate about what they were producing that they were prepared to make any decision necessary to
Yeah.
continue that dream and aspiration. And that perseverance and the more and more it got in front of many people,
Yeah.
if everybody's worth $1, right, and it goes in front of a million people, that's $1 million, right? And so, and I think when you're prepared to make those decisions, but it only comes from the confidence of knowing who you are. And even if you don't know and understand things from different books and different literature, if you know who you are, at least there's a constant there. And I think a lot of us we struggle because we don't have a constant.
Yeah.
Some for a lot of us, our constants are our partners, not ourselves.
Mm. Which can be
You know what I
tricky.
mean?
Yeah.
That, that,
Which
that
can be, yeah.
yes,
Putting
which
your
can be
identity in
tricky.
someone
I,
else. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, one day someone came up to me, asked me, when was the last time I sat down and closed my eyes and listened to the surrounding noise and did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No music, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I've not done this since I was 6.
Wow.
I, I've not had any reason to just do nothing. I've had no reason
Mm-hmm.
to do, and he introduced me to the concept that as we grow, for the first 20 years of our lives, we identify the things we enjoy.
Mm.
People who are fulfilled after they spend the rest of their life trying to do the things they enjoyed in the first 20 years in style,
I
right?
love that. I
But
love that.
right. But most people think of it this way: when you were a teenager, you just wanted a car. Now you want a Ferrari. You,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So, yeah. So when you were a kid, all you wanted to do was to watch your TV program. Now it's there. You don't watch it.
Mm.
You never even got to finish that program when you're young because of
Mm-hmm.
bedtime precautions and
Mm-hmm.
all this kind of stuff. Now it's there. It's free, but you want to go and pay to go somewhere that you never actually even wanted to go. But
Mm-hmm.
because most people say that that is a way of expressing your ability to travel, that's what you do. And so that
Mm-hmm.
becomes a new objective. And
Mm-hmm.
so as we grow, we get chances to be able to consolidate the things that we have tested. Like when we're
Mm-hmm.
young, it's like testing phase. It's like a startup testing. If you don't know what you enjoy in your first 20 years, it means you've not been paying attention to what you've been doing, right? Which
Yeah.
is a very common course for a lot of people at that age. But when you get to realize that, you now start to go back and think, oh, this is what made me happy. I actually had a very good amount of fulfillment and enjoyment from that experience. Maybe I should do more of that. And you'll start to find that the things you do are less expensive.
The
That,
things
that
that you
yeah,
love. Yes, the
the
things
things that you
that you
love are less
love.
expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're not
Yeah.
expensive at all. The premium that's added to things is the amount of is the difference between what you actually like
Yeah.
and what the world likes.
Yeah.
That premium is what you're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
But if
Yeah.
you go for the things that you genuinely enjoy, your body has spent years doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's like a memory foam where it's like, oh yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
remember this.
Mm-hmm.
Even smells that even when I
Yeah.
when I went to fragrances, I understood that there were certain smells that made you feel a certain way, not because of how it smelled, but because of what when you smelled it last.
Yes, the memory connected to it. So tell us a little bit about, we only have a couple minutes left. So tell us
Sure.
a little bit about how you entered into the fragrance business, and tell us a little bit more about Mood Seasons.
Okay, so Mood Seasons is a brand, it's my perfume brand, and we create scents to essentially reflect how you feel. It's on the
Mm-hmm.
premise of think of scent as an energy trail.
Mm-hmm.
So so the scent combines with your natural energy, your pheromones, so to speak, and it enhances a natural scent that you already have in the context of the additional ingredients that have been added to it. So
Ah,
I created the scent to reflect that dynamic. So mood is based on energy. So mood is just another way of saying energy, and seasons was at any given point in time. So I created the brand to create scents that reflect how you feel, how you want to feel at any given point in time. Making of the perfumes, obviously I dropped out of med school, but I did a few years of biochemistry, so the organic chemistry kind of helped.
yes.
And just the business, the desire to have a business, it was just like, okay, let's just combine the two. And I wanted to, I always want to do things I love and enjoy. And so everything
Mm,
that I have done business venture wise is based on that driver.
yeah.
And luckily the enjoying the business that I'm running coincides with the profits that I've been making. And I
Yeah.
can't ask for more than that.
Yes. As we wrap up, I always ask our guests to consider someone watching, but I would like for you to actually speak to a young person. So, someone who is below 20, who may be in circumstances that they did not create for themselves, that may have been placed on them. What do you hope that they understand, the young person? What do you hope they understand from this conversation as they're looking to their future?
That's a good question. I would say the message I'll send is whatever you are experiencing and going through, write it down.
Mm,
As you write it down and progress in life, write down any progress that you've made from it. You will start to find that, a lot of the experiences you're going through, they feel like negative experiences because you're not actively aware of them. So
mm,
you're aware of the result,
mm.
but you're not aware of the entire experience. So
Yes.
you're aware of, I feel this way, but you're not aware of all the things that have led up to feeling this way. You're not aware of the
Mhm.
chain, the supply chain involved in engineering this overall feeling that you're feeling. And the young person needs to understand that it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
Remember that feeling and use that to motivate you to be able to make decisions that would not allow you to get into that feeling ever again if it's a negative one. Any positive feeling you have, write that down too and try to repeat the
Mm,
same thing you did that got you that feeling.
mhm,
The more and more you start to identify what caused the positive feelings, the more and more you will do things that will cause the positive feelings. The more and more you identify what caused your negative feelings, the more and more you will look out for those things, and you'll probably be making conscious decisions to not do them. And I think
mhm.
if you can take a step back to do that now, you will not only be a positive person, you'll be a fantastic business owner because that's something that business owners even today struggle with. If you can learn how to do that with yourself, again, you are the very first business you can ever run. So if you can learn how to run the business of you now with all the trials that you're experiencing in your infant stage as the teenager you are going to be very wealthy if
Right.
you're able to
A
sort them out now.
mastermind,
So
a
take it on the
mastermind
chin, you'll
later.
be fine. Yeah.
I know that there are some adults who just heard that advice and say, "Whew, I have never thought of it that way. I've never even sat down to actually write down what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what I'm experiencing to be able to track and consider the progress that I'm making." Sometimes our lives are moving so fast that we don't even give ourselves the bandwidth to be able to do that. One last question, because I know here in the US, um, there is um, there is conversation around African Americans wanting to return to Africa and wanting to be able to identify a place of a returning to home per se. You have been in multiples. You've gone from Ghana to the UK, back to Ghana. What is some advice that you would give us as African Americans if we wanted to um, make that return or to make those decisions or moves? What's some advice you would give us?
Come on holiday. Come and see it. I think you know, I moved obviously back to Ghana for good in 2018. And this was just a year before the year of return, the official year of return. And I can safely say there was no logical reason as to why I came. It was all emotional. It was all mental. There was just that feeling that I had. I have not been proven wrong since moving here.
Mm,
That's what I can say.
wow.
And I think the thing that's driving a lot of African Americans to move, they are finding it here, and not just in
Mm,
Ghana. They're finding it in Kenya. They're finding it in all other places. And there's a natural synergy that comes in between those that move to Africa and those that are there, because whatever America is missing in spirit, Africa has in physical. There's a saying in our
mm-hmm,
language.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Africa, in Africa, there is a certain freedom, mental freedom that you get, that I think countries like America and the UK tend to, whether it's deliberately or not, it tends to hold you back mentally. You can go forward as much as you can physically in these countries, I think. But in Africa, we human beings, our gift is our emotion. And, you know, unfortunately, if you don't cushion your emotion, how you feel, you're always going to be feeling like you're missing something.
Mm,
And that missing something is reason enough to, at the very least, come and see what's
come
here.
and see.
Come and feel, come and see, come and feel the energy. In fact, I should probably even add that I'm unofficially the Move Me Back to Africa ambassador as of today. It's not official yet. So it's probably a good time for me to even talk about this. And yeah, and and one of the things that they brought me on board to do is to, that there is an initial, I come to Ghana, but there's no continuous spark that joins after that. You're usually kind of just like left in your own devices. I think there are enough people that have moved in a previous cycle. There are people that
Okay.
moved in the 90s, there are people that moved in the 2000s, and they all have a similar context and understanding how things are. So my role is to make sure I bring them all together and work with ambassadors in other
Mm,
African countries, because it's a continental thing, to be able to showcase the free movement and show that it's not just one country in Africa we're trying to tell you to move to. We're trying to tell you that the whole entire continent is free for you to move back to.
oh.
That whole entire continent that you are in America, with the different states. Yes, there are different countries, all of which value you for the African that you are.
Mm,
So Africa is basically requesting that you remember that you're African,
yeah. Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah, to remember that you're African. And I think that's very important, because your synergy comes from your Africanness, not your African Americanness.
Mm,
So
mm-hmm.
when I always tell African Americans to leave the American in them in America and come back as an African,
Oh,
and you will find that things will never be the same for you.
Mm,
Like it's you will look at things in a whole new different light. I can tell you that
mhm,
from experience and from people that have come. I've helped a lot of people to move to Ghana from different places, and just the way in which they see life now, the peace and calm in which they have. It's imagine
yeah.
someone moving from New York to
Mhm.
Accra, and the kind of peace, the
Peace.
difference in the peace that they must
The
be having.
pace.
Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah,
So
and so yeah,
I can attest. I can attest. My daughter, the my 24-year-old, is the one that was with me when we were there.
yes,
Life changing, life changing, and I literally I see some of the people who are on and Novelet and I. When I came back, I literally kept talking about I need to figure out how to get back because it life changing, life changing. I can attest to it.
yeah.
Thank
And
you
and the,
so
and the great
much.
thing is, a lot of African Americans are building communities and developments where
Mm-hmm.
they're buying land. I mean, even the mere fact you can buy land in itself is a reason to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think, it's just words can't describe what it is. And I always encourage if you have the opportunity to come and visit, just come. Don't even think twice about it. Think of it like it's a Mexico trip,
Yeah,
and just do
just
it.
come,
Yeah,
just come.
just do it. Just come.
Ah,
Yeah.
Nanya, you have just given us just like a buck. I can't even, it's not even a bucket full of wisdom and insight. It is just an overflow of your authentic heart and space. And so I truly appreciate you sharing so much of you on our flip side conversation. But I want to make sure people know how to follow you, how to get their hands on mood seasons, how to support all of the things that you are doing, to connect with you if they're like, I just want to come, all of the things. So, how can they follow and connect with you?
I'm very, very happy to connect. So I'm very active on Instagram as Mr. Mood. So um, Mr. underscore Mood Seasons. Sorry, I have to remember that. And I'm on Facebook with the same name, although I'm not too active there, but you can find me. And then you can buy my perfumes on moodseasons.com. And then of course, Mood Seasons has an Instagram page, Mood Seasons underscore fragrances. And we like I said, we create not just standard fragrances, but bespoke ones. If you want a scent that really resonates with your inner person and who you
Mhm.
are and the kind of energy that you want to emit everywhere you go, that's what we focus on. And we're here to do that. And yeah, as you can see in very, very lovely design bamboo bottles. And I think I am my whole entire MO is about mood and feeling and energy.
Mhm.
And I'm always here to support and add value to people that want to add value to the place I call home. So very, very eager to connect. And yeah, please feel free.
Oh, well, there you have it. We have had another flip side conversation. And I know that you probably had sheets and sheets of notes. But some powerful moments for me in this conversation were connected to be willing to study you. Because when you have studied you and you understand you, it then allows you to understand how to add value, and the money will come after. The more value you add to the planet, the benefits will follow. And the concept that as we move through life, there are circumstances that we have all had, but there comes a point in time when you have to make a decision about when is it time for me to trade in this for the next thing that I'm now moving outside of the space of grace for that season. It's now a time for accountability. And you don't have to just sit in that place based on the circumstances you've gone through. You actually can make a trade. So I thank you again, Nanye. This has been a powerful one of those where you're going to have to sit and push the replay in order to get all of the nuggets. And again, I also just want to say thank you for staying up, because I know it's almost 11 o'clock, if not 11 o'clock there at night.
Yeah, no, I use my bedtime is usually 11 o'clock, so you're fine. You're fine.
Awesome, awesome. We just made it to the checkpoint. But we encourage everyone, stay with us. We're continuing our conversations around healing, around creating a flip, around being intentional with getting in the driver's seat of your story and staying true to who you authentically are. So, same time, same place, next week, right here on the flip side. We'll see you then.